these two labor organizations are Nigerian labor organizations, but they were not being financed or funded by Nigeria. I don't know if you know that, but that was the reality. One was being financed by KGB. That is true. And the other one was being financed by CIA. That was the truth. And then I came on the scene. I needed for Nigeria a Nigerian labor union organized by Nigeria, controlled by Nigeria, financed by Nigeria.
Well, it doesn't sound more convincing than hearing it from a man who has been the head of governance in Nigeria. If Chief Olusegun Obasanjo tells you that foreign intelligence agencies, particularly CIA, interfere in your nation's internal affairs, best believe that. Because unlike you, Obasanjo speaks from first-hand experience. He was the first Nigerian president at the country's latest return to democratic rule in 1999. But before then, he previously ruled as a military head of state between 1976 and 1979, which is particularly important in this story because that's when everything you heard earlier transpired. That video was taken early January 2026 during a book launch in honor of a former president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Hassan Somonu. There, Obasanjo shared a story he's never publicly told before. According to him, what was central to his decision to reform the Nigerian labor movement during his time as a military head of state was the obvious interference on foreign intelligence units and the internal affairs of the country's labor structures. This was in the Cold War era, Nigeria's post-independence formative years, a period that came with growing concerns for the West over the spread of communist and socialist influence in countries that they hope to keep subservient to their own economic interests. You don't need to be a genius to work out why labor unions were a major target. Before the entire labor complex was collapsed into the Nigeria Labour Congress following Obasanjo's reform, it was largely fragmented into multiple factions, including two main bodies, the United Labour Congress, ULC, and the Nigerian Trade Union Congress, NTUC. Both were able to dominate the landscape because of the international support they received. The ULC, which was considered more moderate, was heavily funded and controlled by the United States CIA, while the main rival, the NTUC, was funded by the Soviet Union's KGB. You may wonder why these foreign powers were particularly interested in Nigeria during that period of the country's history. Well, not like they ever take a break from meddling in the affairs of other countries. But that period was particularly important because it was the time the country experienced an oil boom coming out of a civil war. But make no mistake, Obasanjo may have reformed the complex in the 70s to be driven by internal control and funding. However, we cannot rule out the possibility of present-day infiltration. How do you explain that just as Nigeria secured its first indigenous refinery with the Dangote refinery after years of relying on imports, a standoff suddenly broke out between a labor union and the company? Just in case you're still not convinced, in the same period of the OBJ military regime, a Nigerian freelance journalist, Sam Ogun, confessed that he spied for the CIA for nearly a decade against Nigeria. Coincidentally, one of the major tasks assigned to him by the CIA was to monitor university campuses and report on the activities of student unions. Mr. Ogun, who initially had no knowledge that he was being used as a spy, was also deployed to target trade unions, journalism, and civil society spaces. You notice the pattern. Only someone who does not care or fails to understand the importance of national security will look at this documented evidence and still doubt that external interference exists and that it comes at a tremendous cost, including but not limited to economic development and long-term advancement as a nation. For the spearhead, Mike Chubo.